Thomas Riley. Hundreds of sex abuse cases filed. Private schools kept decades of sexual abuse secret. This is not uncommon. It was the church, and I grew up and I was associated with more than one location. Started out in Athens, Alabama. Went to another town in Alabama. Ended up down the Gulf Coast at one point. So I served at several different places, and it was a common theme in the churches that you really hushed. It wasn't like you just rushed. In fact, I don't know of any case that ever got reported to the police. There was some slap on the hand to the victim, not to the, I'm trying to say, to the one that was accused. They would give us some kind of church punishment. And often the victim was ostracized. Past couple of years brought new revelations about sexual abuse at private schools. At least 8 private schools in New England have launched or disclosed investigations this year after clearly public pressure from media and whatnot. A new Boston Globe investigation has opened a wider window on the scope of the problem. The report done by the Spotlight Unit that exposed the sexual abuse scandal in the church found at least 67. Let's start that again. The report done by the Spotlight Unit that exposed the sexual abuse scandal in the church found at least 67 New England schools, just in New England, have faced accusations since 1991. The Globe also found more than 200 former students say they've been assaulted or harassed, and years of alleged cover-ups in some cases. I know that for a fact. Not in those particular schools, but I know it's common in Christendom. St. George's School in Rhode Island is one school under investigation. Ann Scott is a survivor who was allegedly raped in 1977 at the school by a former athletic trainer when she was 15. Family later brought a lawsuit. School fought back with its own suit, pressured her to sign a gag order. Well, abuse, Ann Scott, abuse survivor, they really turned hostile and were trying to come after that, deposing all our neighbors, deposing all my roommates, all community leaders. Oh, they attacked the victim. They go. I've seen that too. I've seen the little girls, teenage girls. They get pounced on. Well, you shouldn't have dressed this way, and they'll, you look like a slut. They're horrible. So I got shocked. It wasn't as strong then, I think, to put it in context as I am now. I wasn't as strong then. Of course not. It became a lot of pressure. I just said no amount of money is worth tearing my family apart. When you are assaulted as a child and a victim of rape, you lose your voice. You lose your soul. You're sort of destroyed as a person, your confidence, your self-image, and the gag order just sealed all that. These are more victims speaking up here. Hari, however you pronounce that. Hari, the trainer, died in 1996. Lawyers for victims say as many as 50 alumni from the school were abused, mostly by staff. Todd Wallach is a member of the Spotlight team, George. So give us an idea of how widespread this is. This isn't just a couple of private schools in New England. Todd Wallach responds, no, it's much wider than a lot of us ever imagined. We originally started reporting on this after Ann Scott, the survivor you featured, broke her silence, broke the gag order, spoke about the abuse after she suffered at St. George's in December, and that prompted other victims to come forward, many after decades and decades where they had kept this secret. So we started building a list, and it kept getting longer and longer. Some were reported before individually, others hadn't. We looked through the lawsuits, we talked to lawyers. Since our story is on Sunday, we have been getting flooded with tips about additional schools, showing that we have not even captured the full scope of all the abuse that's going on. And this is the same thing in churches. It's not just the Christian schools. It's the Christian, it's the Christian churches. Given the nature of their name, private schools, they are private institutions. Do they have to report alleged or abuse by teachers to the state like public schools? Generally, in public schools, teachers are required to be licensed, and they're overseen by licensing agencies that can publicly discipline them and let other people be aware of potential problems. That isn't true with private schools. That's why Christian schools can get by with so much more from daycare on through, which generally don't have to license their educators. They're also not subject to public records laws. They're not overseen by public school boards with open meetings laws. So a lot of this information is kept secret. They're able to sign confidentiality agreements. For that reason, it allows a lot of the abuse to remain secret. It potentially allows abusers to go to other schools. There was a person that worked at St. George's, for instance, George Thompson, who had been accused by a dozen students of inappropriate touching. He went to another school, Taft, a few years ago, with great recommendations, and Taft had no idea that he'd been previously subject to those allegations. St. George's hadn't told the state and said at the time they didn't realize it. They didn't realize it was or fell under the definition of sexual abuse and need to be reported. We found that 11 people who had been accused went to other schools. So what did those schools say? What was their rationale or justification for taking so long to go public with the information? Well, in some cases, the schools would say a lot of these abuses happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they now know much more about how to handle it than they did then. Some will say that sexual abuse allegations are very tricky. They want to respect the privacy of the victims. They want to also be cognizant that they can't always prove allegations. In a lot of cases, you have as alumnus who make some accusations, and the staffer is the only other person who was in the room, and the staffer denies it. So they say they're trying to be careful about not ruining somebody's career. Some of the students who have been abused say they are too worried about their reputation and wish they had done more to at least tell the community about the allegations and find out whether there are other students wanting to come forward. And this, you see the way that the churches go about trying to, the justifications they use. I think you're beginning to see that. That quick, we get into our 30-minute run here. You can go to www.boycottchurches.org. I keep this to about 30 minutes in the mornings. I've only missed one morning, which was last Sunday. And in 30 minutes, I've gone to 40 minutes, but average of 30 minutes, I do this. If you or someone you know has been a victim of grooming, sexual abuse in a Christian school or Christian church of any sort, you can reach out to us, to me, at 888-501-6689. I'm here. I'll be glad to listen to you. I would want to hear what you've got to say about your incident, about what happened to you. And if there's a way that I can encourage you, I'm not going to push you, but I highly encourage you to find a way to report the incident. I had a cousin, now deceased for years and years, decades, honestly. And this incident of church-related sexual abuse, she was forced into giving oral sex. And the church basically, you could say, ostracized her. The situation it put on her, it messed her up her life. I didn't know what was wrong. It took a long time. She had tried to tell me We were very close as cousins. She tried to tell me, and I was, being about the same age, I was naive. I was very much wrapped up in the church. I didn't quite comprehend what she was trying to say until sometime later. And then it was too late for me to do anything to help her. And she died at 35 because her life was just so messed up. And the perpetrator basically got a little slap on the wrist. Never reported to any authorities, any secular government authorities. There was never any great punishment. The perpetrator never went to jail, never had to answer to in a court of law, never was put in a position to there were restrictions what he could do in the church. That was it. There were restrictions to what he could do. And I knew another case when I worked at a church down in Milton, Florida. It was well known within the congregation. And it was well known within the congregation, and he was out there. What he was allowed to do had some limitations. The congregation overall did not know. I was in a leadership role, not the top pastor or anything like that, but it wasn't like they sit down and said, this is going on here. It was more like in a undertone rumor. And he was bouncing around. Anyway, I know this happens. I witnessed it. And I dealt with it. And it took a long time for me to appreciate just how serious a situation this was and how far reaching it is. That's why I said, your kids are vulnerable. And if you support this institution where all this comes out, you're not paying attention. You just because you don't want to talk about it, just because you don't want to hear it, that doesn't do away with the fact that it's there. And it is there. www.boycottchurches.org, 888-501-6689. I hope you have a good Tuesday.